The Scribe's Apprentice. Layla traced her fingers over the intricate calligraphy etched into her skin, feeling the familiar tingle of magic coursing through the inky lines. At 16, she was the youngest apprentice the Master Scribe had ever taken on, and her talent for channeling mystical energies through the written word far exceeded that of students twice her age. But talent came with a price. As her powers grew, so did the writing covering every inch of her body, sacred verses, ancient spells and secret incantations spiraling across her flesh in an ever-expanding tapestry. The magic flowed through her, using her as a conduit and canvas. Layla sighed, pulling the sleeves of her robe down to cover the glowing script. Tonight was the new moon when the veil between worlds grew thin. The Master would be expecting her soon, for another grueling lesson in bridging realms. She made her way through the winding corridors of the Citadel, an ancient fortress perched high in the mountains. For centuries, it had served as a sanctuary and training ground for the scribes, an order of mystics who safeguarded the knowledge of the ancients and maintained a balance between the seen and unseen. Entering the observatory tower, Layla found the Master already seated at his desk, quill in hand, furiously scrawling in a massive tome. His own skin was nearly obscured by layers upon layers of shimmering text. The oldest spells faded to a pale shimmer, while newer incantations pulsed with vibrant energy. He beckoned her forward, without looking up. "You're late, apprentice. The celestial confluence waits for no one." "Apologies, Master." Layla bowed her head. "I was meditating on the verse of veils, as you instructed." The older man's eyes gleamed. "Good. You'll need every ounce of focus for tonight's ritual. The barriers grow weak, and dark forces gather. We must reinforce the wards, lest the shadows find purchase in our realm." Layla nodded solemnly, though a thrill of excitement coursed through her. This would be her first time participating in such advanced work. She took her place at the scrying pool, as the Master began the invocation, his weathered voice rising and falling in the sacred cadence. Focusing her mind, Layla channeled her energy into the still water before her. An image began to form slowly, a window into the realm beyond. Inky tendrils of shadow wreathed and pulsed, seeking any crack or fissure to seep into the mortal world. The Master's chanting grew more urgent as he wove wards of protection, his hands a blur as he traced sigils in the air. Layla added her voice to the spell, feeling the magic build within her until it thrummed through her entire being. Just as the veil began to seal, a single shadowy tendril slipped through. It shot towards Layla with terrifying speed. Acting on instinct, she thrust out her hand, crying out words in a language she didn't know she knew. There was a blinding flash, and Layla found herself flung backwards. As her vision cleared, she saw with horror that her outstretched arm was now stained an inky black, strange new symbols writhing beneath her skin. The Master was at her side instantly, his face grave as he examined her arm. "Foolish girl," he muttered. "You've allowed yourself to be marked." Layla stared at the alien script in dismay. Unlike the familiar warmth of her other markings, this felt cold, almost oily. "What does it mean?" she whispered. The older man's brow furrowed. "I'm not certain. These sigils are unlike any I've encountered. But I fear you've been touched by something ancient and dangerous." He gripped her shoulders. "Listen carefully, Layla. You must not attempt to access or channel this magic. Lock it away in the deepest recesses of your mind, until we can research its nature, and find a way to remove it safely." Layla nodded, fighting back tears. She had only wanted to help, to prove herself worthy of her position. Now, she had put herself and possibly the entire order at risk. In the following days, Layla threw herself into her studies with renewed vigor, desperate to find some clue about the nature of her mysterious marking. But as much as she tried to ignore it, she could feel the foreign magic pulsing within her, growing stronger each night. It whispered to her in dreams, hinting at vast reservoirs of power just waiting to be tapped. She caught herself absently tracing the dark symbols several times, only to snatch her hand away as if burned. On the eve of the full moon, Layla tossed and turned in her narrow bed, unable to quiet her racing thoughts. The new markings itched and tingled, more insistent than ever. Unable to bear it longer, she slipped from her room and went to the observatory tower. She wasn't sure what drew her there, but something told her she might find answers among the stars. A gust of chill wind made her shiver as she pushed open the heavy wooden door. The domed ceiling was open to the night sky, a tapestry of celestial light spilling down to illuminate the scrying pool. Moving as if in a trance, Layla approached the still water. Her marked arm lifted off its own accord, fingers splaying wide as they hovered above the surface. The black sigils began to glow with an eerie light, reflecting in the pool below. Layla gasped as the water began to churn and swirl, forming a vortex that threatened to pull her in. She tried to step back, but found herself rooted to the spot. Dark tendrils rose from the vortex, coiling around her limbs. Terror gripped her, as she felt herself being inexorably drawn downward. She opened her mouth to cry for help, but no sound emerged. Just as the inky depths were about to close over her head, strong hands grasped her shoulders, hauling her backwards. Layla collapsed to the floor, gulping in great lungfuls of air. The master knelt beside her, his face etched with concern and something that might have been fear. "What have you done, child?" he breathed. Before Layla could respond, an unearthly screech split the air. Two enormous ravens burst forth from the pool, their feathers gleaming like polished obsidian. They wheeled overhead, red eyes glowing with alien intelligence. To Layla's shock, she understood their harsh cries perfectly when they spoke. "The chosen awakens," croaked one. "The way is opened," answered the other. They swooped down, coming to rest on either side of Layla. Despite the master's warning shouts, she felt no fear as they regarded her with tilted heads. What are you?" she whispered. The raven on her left ruffled its feathers. "We are the eyes of Odin, servants of the All-Father." "Hugin and Munin," added the other. "Thought and memory. We have waited long for one such as you to bridge the gap between realms." The master stepped forward, placing himself between Layla and the birds. "Begone, tricksters. You have no power here." The ravens let out harsh cries that might have been laughter. "Foolish mortal. It is not by your leave that we come, but by the will of forces far greater than you can comprehend." They turned their crimson gaze back to Layla. "The old magics stir. The time of reckoning draws near. You must prepare yourself, young scribe, for the role you are to play." With that, they launched themselves skyward, quickly vanishing among the stars. In their wake, an oppressive silence fell over the tower. The master helped Layla to her feet, his expression troubled. "It seems I have failed you, my student. I had hoped to shield you from these matters until you were ready, but fate, it seems, has other plans." He sighed heavily. "Come. There is much you must know." Over the next several hours, nestled in the master's private study, Layla learned the true history of the scribes, not merely keepers of knowledge, but guardians of the cosmic balance. They had worked secretly for millennia to maintain the boundaries between worlds, keeping darker forces at bay. But those boundaries were eroding. An ancient evil stirred in the void between realms, seeking to remake reality in its twisted image. According to prophecy, only one with the power to channel energies from both sides of the veil could hope to stop it. "The markings you bear," the master explained, "manifest that dual nature. Part of you exists in our world, while another is attuned to the realms beyond. It is a heavy burden, but also a great gift. Layla's mind reeled as she struggled to take it all in. But why me? I'm nobody special. The older man's eyes crinkled with unexpected warmth. Oh, but you are, my dear. From the moment you arrived on our doorstep as an orphan child, I sensed a great destiny about you. It seems the universe agrees. He took her marked arm gently in his gnarled hands. These sigils are keys, Layla. They will allow you to unlock abilities beyond imagining. But you must learn to master them, lest they master you. How? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. That, he said with a slight smile, is what I'm here to teach you. And so began Layla's proper training. Days blurred into weeks as she pushed herself to the limits of endurance, honing body and mind into finely tuned instruments of cosmic will. She learned to merge the rigid structures of mortal magic with the wild primal energies of the outer realms. She slowly, painstakingly, brought the alien markings under her control, weaving their power into the familiar patterns of her existing spells. Ravens became frequent visitors, bearing cryptic messages and fragments of prophecy. Through their eyes, Layla caught glimpses of distant worlds and the encroaching shadows that threatened them all. As her strength and skill grew, so did her sense of purpose. She no longer felt like a simple apprentice, playing at powers beyond her ken. She was becoming something more, a bridge between worlds, the fulcrum upon which the fate of reality would turn. Finally, on the eve of the equinox, the Master declared her training complete. "You have surpassed all my expectations," he said, pride evident in his voice. "You are ready to face your destiny." Standing atop the citadel's highest tower that night, Layla raised her arms to the star-strewn sky. Power surged through her, no longer bound by the limits of flesh and bone. She had become a living conduit, channeling the very essence of creation. As the veil between worlds grew thin, she sensed the encroaching darkness, an all-consuming void that sought to devour everything in its path. But she was no longer afraid. With a voice that echoed across realities, Layla began to weave her spell. Light burst from every line and whirl of the script that adorned her body, forming a dazzling barrier against the shadows. She poured everything she had into the work, every scrap of knowledge, every ounce of will, every shred of hope, love, and defiance. The void raged against her defenses, but she could find no purchase. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, Layla felt the darkness recede. The immediate threat had passed, but she knew this was only the beginning. Many battles lay ahead, as she worked to repair the cosmic balance and prepare for the final confrontation. But she would not face these challenges alone. She had the wisdom of the scribes, the guidance of thought and memory, and the power of two realms flowing through her veins. Layla smiled, as a pair of ravens settled on her shoulders. No longer was she merely an apprentice. She had become the author of her destiny, and perhaps the savior of all realities. As the sun climbed higher, she squared her shoulders and turned to face the new day. The next chapter of her story was about to begin.